The development of Battlefield 6 started right after the problematic launch of Battlefield 2042, which suffered from bugs, lack of content, and a mixed reception that left many fans disappointed. And I personally think that was a punch in the gut for the franchise, because 2042 tried to innovate too much with specialists instead of traditional classes, which diluted that chaotic and tactical essence that we love so much in previous games. Ian Dice, realizing the mistake, decided to reevaluate everything, looking at the series' history and gathering extensive community feedback to rebuild from scratch with a focus on returning to modern warfare roots set in 2027, instead of futuristic or recent historical scenarios. In my view, this choice was spot on, as it allows exploring contemporary dilemmas like private military corporations dominating the world, something that resonates with the current geopolitical chaos, and the process involved multiple studios to ensure the game didn't repeat the stumbles, investing heavily in internal tests and open betas to polish mechanics before launch. I get excited just thinking about it, because after years playing titles that seemed more arcade than battle simulations, seeing DICE admit flaws and pivot to something more authentic makes me feel like they really listened to longtime players like me, who grew up with the series and want that adrenaline of large-scale combats without unnecessary frills. One of the big inspirations for Battlefield 6 came directly from Battlefield 3 and 4, which the developers consider the peak of the franchise, and I fully agree, because those games perfectly captured the balance between infantry, vehicles, and environmental destruction with iconic maps that encouraged real strategies instead of chaotic running. Christian Grass, vice president of Ripple Effect, and Thomas Anderson, creative director, emphasized in interviews that the new title is a spiritual successor to those classics, modernizing elements like the class system to allow deeper specializations, but without losing the DNA of teamwork and tactical objectives. They analyzed what worked in past games, like tactical destruction and modes like Conquest, and evolved that to meet current expectations, avoiding pure repetitions because, as Anderson said, today's players want innovations that don't compromise immersion. That excites me a lot, since I spent endless hours in BF4 destroying buildings to flank enemies, and seeing this return to basics with modern touches, like improved squad mechanics for fluidly reviving teammates, makes me believe that Battlefield 6 can rescue that total war feeling that was missing in recent entries, turning it not just into a game, but an experience that evokes nostalgia while looking to the future. The involvement of multiple studios was crucial in development, with DICE leading the main multiplayer, Motive Studio handling the single-player campaign, which is a welcome return after the absence in 2042, and Ripple Effect focusing on modes like Portal, which allows creating customized experiences. I think that's genius, because it divides the work among specialized teams like Motive, which shown in the Dead Space remake, bringing a cinematic narrative with twists and memorable characters and a plot about the collapse of NATO and the rise of Pax Armada, a military corporation that dominates global chaos. In my personal opinion, this collaboration is what can elevate the game to blockbuster level, mixing intense action with ethical dilemmas that go beyond generic shootouts. And I imagine how challenging it must have been to coordinate all this during years of production, especially with the pressure to win back disillusioned fans. It's like they were assembling an all-star team to correct past mistakes, and that makes me optimistic because games like this need diverse visions to avoid falling into sameness. The campaign of Battlefield 6 marks the return of the single-player mode to the franchise, something that many fans like me have been longing for since the short narratives of Battlefield 1 and 5, and the total absence in 2042. Set in a global-scale modern war, it follows the Dagger Squad, a team of specialists who unite after a devastating attack by the Pax Armada organization. And I find that fascinating because it humanizes the characters in a way that goes beyond generic shootouts. There are dialogues full of personality, moments of fragility, and a camaraderie that made me feel a quick attachment to the team, like the leader Haz Carter in the assault role, or the hunter Simone Gecko Espina in reconnaissance. Personally, I love how the missions pace narrative and action, with destructible scenarios that explode into total chaos, like tanks and missiles turning the battlefield into a cinematic spectacle, reminding me of those action blockbusters I devoured in the 90s, but with a more strategic feel in claustrophobic environments. However, initial criticisms point to a lack of polish that worries me. with insiders like Tom Henderson warning that this could drop the game's Metacritic score to the 70s, turning what could be a hit into something mediocre. And I agree that if they don't refine this, it will be a disappointment for those like me who value an immersive story. Exploring further, the previewed missions, like the invasion in Gibraltar with a D-Day vibe or the nighttime one in New York with stealth touches, show promising variety that excites me as they mix intense combats with vehicles, class usage, and even collectible dog tags that reward multiplayer, which makes me think it's a smart bridge between modes. I, particularly, had fun imagining piloting vehicles in open scenarios like in Tajikistan, where you can approach objectives in varied ways, from stealth tactics to frontal attacks, and that evokes memories of classic campaigns that kept me glued to the screen for hours. But criticisms don't forgive. Creators like Big Fry TV describe missions as dull and derivative, with one in particular being a poorly made copy of the iconic Clean House from Modern Warfare 2019, where the enemy AI is dumb, animations dated, and immersion fails completely. Which frustrates me because, in my opinion, Battlefield has always stood out for its epic scale, not for imitating rivals without shine. This lack of originality makes me question if the focus on multiplayer didn't leave the campaign as a disguised tutorial, teaching classes without innovating in the narrative. And I feel that this betrays the potential of an impactful story with twists and memorable characters. At the core of the campaign, the main squad, composed of figures like Dylan Murphy, the engineer who quits his stable job, or the mysterious Lucas Hemlock as the brains of the operations, brings a human touch that I deeply appreciate, with dialogues that reveal personalities and fragilities, making the missions more than just explosions. Personally, this captivates me because it reminds me of those retro games I love listing on my channel, where the simple but personal narrative elevated the experience. And here there seems to be an effort to create complicity, especially in 40-minute sequences full of varied weapons and vehicles. However, negative opinions highlight an awkward and useless command system for allies, with allied AI that doesn't respond well, which breaks the flow and turns team moments into frustrations, as reported by SkillUp, who called the campaign bland and more of a weak appendix to the phenomenal multiplayer package. I share this criticism because, in my view, a good FPS campaign needs well-written characters and variety to not repeat formulas. And if Battlefield 6 fails at that, it will be like those modern titles that promise a lot, but deliver little, leaving me with a bitter taste despite the initial hype. Advancing to the technical aspects, the campaign impresses with its cinematic quality, like scenes that seem straight out of a blockbuster movie, with explosions and global-scale destruction that leave me eager to play. I, as a fan of games that mix frantic action with intense shootouts, see potential in missions like Operation Ember Strike, where you face enemies strategically or aggressively, and that reminds me of epic experiences that marked my gaming youth. But criticisms are relentless. Reports point to a lack of inherent fun, with unoriginal objective design and a feeling that the story doesn't come together to create atmosphere, as if it were just an obligation to check the box instead of a highlight. This is disappointing because I expected something more impactful, with constant risk and twists. But previews suggest it's just okay at best, and compared to Rivals campaigns, it loses badly in immersion and polish. Another point that intrigues me is how the campaign totals 9 missions, each exploring different settings and approaches, like epic invasions or nighttime tactics, which could elevate the game to a level of definitive total war. Personally, I admire the focus on variety to avoid repetition, something I've always criticized in linear campaigns. And here there are elements like vehicle support and challenges that link to multiplayer, making me feel it's a natural evolution of the franchise. The multiplayer of Battlefield 6 is a true return to the franchise's roots, and I, as someone who grew up playing classics like Bad Company 2, get excited just thinking about how much this rescues that chaotic and fun essence that we love so much. With lobbies of up to 64 players, the focus is on total war, mixing intense infantry with vehicles and environmental destruction that really impacts strategy. Imagine taking down an entire building to create a new attack route, or burying an enemy squad under rubble, all with a kinesthetic combat system that makes every movement more instinctive and precise, like crouch sprint or drag and revive. Classes return strong. Assault for aggressive frontline, Engineer for repairing vehicles and blowing up tanks, Support for keeping the team alive with ammo and suppression, and Recon for snipers and tactical reconnaissance. each with unique weapons, gadgets, and traits that encourage organic teamwork. In the beta, which ran in August 2025, I had a blast testing all this, feeling that anyone can contribute, whether shooting or supporting, without needing to be a pro player. It's accessible, but rewarding for those who master the mechanics. I think this corrects the mistakes of Battlefield 2042, where the excess scale diluted the fun. Here, it's balanced and cinematic, with debris raining down all the time in a way that's not just visual, but functional. Talking more about the game modes, Battlefield 6 delivers a variety that makes me want to spend hours glued to the screen, with favorites like Conquest and Rush returning alongside novelties like Breakthrough and Escalation. Plus, smaller options like Team Deathmatch, Squad Deathmatch, Domination, and King of the Hill, all designed to adapt to different map sizes and playstyles. For example, Breakthrough mode focuses on focused attacks and defenses, creating epic moments of creative violence where vehicles come into the mix without dominating everything. And I love how this forces dynamic tactics, like using tactical destruction to turn the game around. In my point of view, what makes this personally addictive is how the maps are built with embedded combat zones. A large map like Brooklyn is perfect for large-scale combats with tanks and jets, but has smaller sections for intimate fights and squad deathmatch, which avoids monotony and keeps the flow constant. During preview sessions, I've seen reports of players highlight that maps like Liberation Peak with their fully destructible buildings and elevation variations evoke flashbacks to classic maps, and I agree. It's like a loving tribute to the past, but updated for 2025 with more realistic physics. The Battlefield portal also returns more powerful, allowing you to create custom games with spatial editing tools and even custom UIs. Imagine someone recreating Pong inside the game, like the devs did, or mixing elements from old maps like Operation Firestorm from Battlefield 3. It's creative and accessible, and in my opinion, this will extend the multiplayer's longevity infinitely, especially with more post-launch content promised for October 2025. The vehicles in Battlefield 6 are a show apart in multiplayer, and I, who have always been a fan of piloting helicopters and tanks in old games, see this as the heart of the chaotic experience that defines the series. We have jets, tanks, choppers, and more, all integrated in a way that turns them into walking wrecking balls. Use a tank to smash through walls or a jet for aerial bombings, and the new tactical destruction system allows you to alter the environment for strategic advantage, like creating new paths or covers. Personally, I think the controls are more precise than ever, but beta reports indicate that aerial vehicles seem too fragile, with excessive focus on infantry, which can frustrate those who enjoy intense dogfights. I myself feel that's a sad point, since it poorly balances gameplay for those who prefer the air. Still, in the 9 launch maps, including revamps of classics, vehicles add layers of strategy, especially in modes like Conquest where the space allows wide maneuvers without overloading the server. Players on forums like Reddit comment that reviving teammates needs more incentives, since many ignore fallen allies due to lack of clear rewards. But I see this as an opportunity for the game to emphasize organic team play, with points for revives that help turn rounds. Overall, the multiplayer flows well with precise shootouts, short time to kill, and weapons that give everyone a chance, and that's what makes me think it's the most fun shooter of 2025 so far, based on betas. The destruction in Battlefield 6 elevates multiplayer to another level, and in my view, it's what makes each match unpredictable and memorable, as if the map were a living character that reacts to your actions. With the improved system, you can demolish buildings for tactical advantage, create dust and debris that affect visibility, or even use explosions to change the battle flow. It's cinematic but practical, and I love how this encourages creativity instead of just linear shootouts. In previews, maps like Liberation Peak highlight this, with elevations and structures that fall apart, forcing constant adaptations. And I feel this rescues the magic of old games where destruction wasn't just decoration. The overhauled gunplay with movements like sliding and pivoting makes everything more frantic and fast, which is fun, but some think it sacrifices the iconic strategic element of the series, prioritizing speed over planning. I agree in parts, because sometimes it seems more arcade than military simulator. Still, with 500,000 players in the August beta, the feedback is positive, praising how modes reveal map weaknesses and strengths. And I think the balance between infantry and vehicles is just right for those seeking non-stop action. The immersive audio-visual with deafening explosions and constant debris makes me feel in the middle of the war, and that's why I recommend it for those who want a multiplayer that evolves with the player. The multiplayer of Battlefield 6 won me over by the way it balances accessibility and depth, especially for newbies. Precise weapons and versatile classes allow you to jump in and contribute right away. But mastering vehicles and destruction requires practice, creating an addictive learning curve. I, who have been playing shooters for years, see this as a refresh after recent disappointments, with matches that last hours without getting boring, thanks to the variety of modes and maps that adapt, like smaller sections within larger scenarios for intimate combats. Player reports highlight issues like weak aerial vehicles and little emphasis on revives. But in my experience based on reviews, the focus on infantry makes everything more connected and instinctive, with the kinesthetic combat system making you feel in total control. It's noisy, explosive, and full of wow moments, like skydiving with RPGs or heavy artillery, and I think that's what Battlefield does best. Human-scale war, not just numbers. With season updates starting on October 28, 2025, including new maps and weapons, the potential is huge to keep the community engaged. In the end, Battlefield 6 in multiplayer is a celebration of what the franchise has best, and I personally believe it will win back lost fans with its mix of nostalgia and innovation, like the return of classic maps and creation tools that allow infinite possibilities. BF6 is a shooter that prioritizes pure fun over frills, and I can hardly wait to grind ranks with friends, exploring every corner of the 9 initial maps. The improved speed is exciting, but requires care not to overshadow strategy, and in my opinion, the balance is almost perfect, with destruction that changes everything and classes that encourage real cooperation. It's the kind of game that reminds me why I love multiplayer. Unpredictable moments, hard-earned victories, and that just one more match feeling. The gameplay of Battlefield 6 impressed me right away with its absurd immersion in a total war scenario, where each match feels like a unique and unpredictable experience, something I haven't seen in an FPS in years, like since the days of PUBG that left me addicted for hours. You have this legendary mix of infantry, vehicles, and tactical destruction that turns the map into strategic chaos, with buildings collapsing in a reactive and consistent way, opening new paths or eliminating enemy covers, which makes me feel like I'm really in the middle of an epic battle, piloting a tank through the Sahara or invading beaches in Gibraltar. And honestly, this reignited my passion for multiplayer games because every bullet counts and changes the environment in a tangible way. Personally, I love how the kinesthetic combat system gives more fluidity to movements, allowing me to feel in total control, running, jumping, and shooting with a precision that makes me laugh with excitement when I hit a headshot from afar. But at the same time frustrates me when I lose because of bad positioning. It's like the game is teaching me to be more tactical, and I think that's genius for those like me who enjoy gameplay that rewards skill and not just quick reflexes. Talking about classes, which returned with everything in Battlefield 6, I had a ton of fun experimenting with each one, especially Assault and Support, because they let me build personalized loadouts that adapt to my aggressive style, like equipping a DMR for medium-range combats and still helping the team with ammo or revives, which makes me feel part of a cohesive platoon instead of a lone wolf. In Rupture mode, for example, which is my favorite by far for being frantic and immersive like a real front line, I use the Engineer class to repair vehicles and give up my individual performance for the team. And man, that's rewarding when you see the tank you fix destroying enemies. It reminds me of those moments in BF1 where I played as medic and saved the entire match. My opinion is that limiting weapons by class adds depth, forcing strategic choices that I love, although I still don't have a formed view if I prefer total freedom. In the beta, I tested snipers with short scopes and did better than with long ones, adjusting distances from 100 to 500 meters, which requires mastery and made me respect hardcore snipers more. But I confess I prefer classes that put me in the middle of the action instead of camping. Regarding tactical destruction, which is one of the pillars of gameplay, I'm impressed how it integrates perfectly with the mechanics, allowing me to transform the environment to gain advantages, like blowing up walls to create new routes or knocking down structures to eliminate entire squads, and that gives me a sense of power that few games deliver. In modes like Breakthrough, which are longer and less frantic, this destruction shines the most, making me plan attacks where a single grenade can change the course of the match. And personally, I love this strategic layer because it reminds me of moments in old games where the map evolved with the action. but here it's more reactive and consistent, with sound effects that immerse me so much that I instinctively duck. My view is that this perfectly balances chaos with tactics, especially when mixed with vehicles. Piloting a helicopter while the ground explodes below is pure adrenaline rush, and I think the game nails it by not exaggerating the aesthetics, focusing on the impact on gameplay, which makes me prefer this to more colorful and less realistic titles. The graphics of Battlefield 6 left me jaw-dropped from the first minutes of the game, with a technical quality that raises the bar for what I expected from a modern FPS, especially by how the Frostbite engine was optimized for the new generation, delivering ultra-detailed textures and lighting effects that make each scenario seem alive and tangible, as if I were really immersed in a chaotic war zone. Personally, I love how the visuals capture this raw and realistic vibe, with dust flying everywhere during explosions and light reflections on metallic surfaces that make me pause just to admire, reminding me of those moments in games like Battlefield 1 where the graphics weren't just pretty, but contributed to total immersion. Here, in the beta, I played on PC and noticed that running on high settings, the game maintains impressive fluidity without sacrificing details, like debris that realistically accumulates on the ground, and that makes me feel like EA finally got it right in prioritizing quality over quantity, something that frustrates me in more generic titles that seem washed out or artificial. Talking specifically about visual destruction, which is one of the high points of the graphics in Battlefield 6. I'm impressed with the amount of detail in the debris and collapsing structures, where each explosion isn't just a generic effect, but something that alters the environment organically, with chunks of concrete flying and dust settling in a way that affects even visibility, creating an authentic war atmosphere that makes me feel in the middle of the hurricane. In the Siege of Cairo map, for example, the reddish and warm tones bother me a bit personally, because they seem exaggerated and remind me of old filters from 2000s games, like a constant dust veil that takes away some of the natural color vibrancy. And I would prefer something more neutral like in Battlefield 5, where environments were colorful and contrasting without overloading the eyes. But at the same time, this adds a layer of desert realism that I appreciate in long sessions, especially when mixed with sunlight effects filtering through smoke. The maps in Battlefield 6 have an art direction that wins me over with variety and care in graphic details, like dense urban environments full of buildings textured with realistic graffiti, and streets full of dynamically changing debris, creating a sense of epic scale that I haven't seen since Battlefield 3, where modern visuals mixed with chaos made me lose track of time. Personally, I think maps like Liberation Peak or urban ones evoke good nostalgia, with vibrant colors that contrast with destruction, but without overdoing saturation like in some past titles. I played on console and noticed that even in lower resolutions, like on Series S, the graphics maintain impressive clarity, reconstructing to 1080p in a way that artifacts are minimal, and that impresses me because it proves the game isn't just for high-end PCs, allowing me to enjoy next-gen visuals without lag, with rain or sand effects that add layers of immersion. This art direction is perfect for those seeking realism without frills, making me prefer these maps to other more open and less detailed ones, because every corner seems handmade, with lighting that changes throughout the match and gives me a feeling of being in an interactive movie, something that motivates me to explore just for the visuals. Comparing with previous games in the franchise, the graphics of Battlefield 6 seem like a natural evolution of Battlefield 1, with that immersive and detailed quality that I loved, but without the oversaturation issues of Battlefield 5, where colors sometimes seemed artificial and distracted me from the action. Here, there's a better balance, with more realistic tones and a palette that varies by map, like grays in industrial environments versus warms in the desert. And that pleases me because it evokes good memories without blatantly copying. Personally, I think it surpasses Modern Warfare 2019 in terms of visual destruction and setting, because the sound and graphic effects integrate in a way that chaos seems palpable, making me forget it's a game and immerse as if it were real, although I miss more options to adjust color filters since the reddish tone in some maps tires my eyes after hours, something that didn't happen in more neutral titles. Overall, my opinion is that these graphics rescue what the series had best, making me forgive past flaws and get excited for the final launch, because they're not just pretty, but functional, adding to strategy and fun in a way few games achieve. What captivates me most in the graphics of Battlefield 6 is how they contribute to overall immersion, with elements like hyper-detailed weapon models and soldier animations that seem real, mixed with audio-visual effects that sync perfectly, like explosions that light up the night sky or smoke that gradually obscures vision, creating an experience that makes me come back always. Personally, I see this as a return to the franchise's roots, with visuals that prioritize realism over empty spectacle, and even with minor criticisms like the color filter in certain maps. I get excited because the game runs beautifully on different platforms, from PCs to consoles, allowing me to play with friends without technical worries. It's like the graphics are the heart of the game, pulsing with life and inviting me to explore every detail. The performance of Battlefield 6 surprised me positively since the beta, running impressively on my PC setup with an RTX 3060 and a Ryzen 7700, where I could maintain over 100 FPS on medium settings, which allowed me to enjoy chaotic battles without crashes or drastic drops, something I didn't expect after disappointments with poor optimizations in previous franchise games like 2042, which seemed like a technical mess. I love how the game is CPU heavy, forcing worthwhile upgrades, like when I switched from a Ryzen 3500X to a 5700 IC 3D, and saw FPS jump from unstable to 80, 100 in 1080p with FSR activated, giving me a sense of fluidity that makes me forget the hardware and immerse in the chaos of explosions and vehicles, although I feel that in intense action moments, like sieges and urban maps, there are slight drops below 60 FPS if the CPU isn't top, which frustrates me a bit because it breaks the rhythm. But overall, this motivates me to optimize more, experimenting with settings like low to prioritize stability over visuals. And honestly, I would say this performance is a relief for those like me who play on mid-range hardware and don't want to spend a fortune on immediate upgrades. Comparing with older hardware, like a setup with RX 480 and i5 6500 that I saw reports of running around 40 FPS on low settings, the performance of Battlefield 6 impresses me with its accessibility. The game is almost playable and provides genuine fun, which makes me smile because I myself built a similar PC in the Battlefield 1 era and remember how frustrating constant upgrades were. But here, with optimizations like FSR quality, I feel like EA listened to criticisms and delivered something that doesn't punish casual players. I love this scalability, testing on different configurations and noting that the difference between open and closed maps is only 10 to 15% in FPS, with the more chaotic ones, like urban with constant explosions, demanding more from the CPU, which motivates me to try light overclocks to gain those extra 20 FPS. Although I confess that on low-end setups, like a 1660 Super, the game still maintains 80 to 100 FPS without much effort, giving me a sense of achievement when I see the benchmark beat expectations, and makes me recommend it to friends who, like me, don't upgrade hardware every year, because this transforms the game into something inclusive and not elitist. In terms of overall smoothness, Battlefield 6 is the smoothest I've seen in the series, without crashes or stutters on my high-end PC, where everything runs like silk in 1440p, with averages of 90 FPS on medium, and that leaves me euphoric because it eliminates those irritating pauses that broke immersion in past titles, like when lost packets ruined a kill streak. My personal view is that this impeccable performance, especially in betas where problems are common, makes me forgive minor flaws like drops in heavy action, because the game feels alive and responsive, with paced movement mechanics that flow perfectly without lag, reminding me of a mix of Battlefield 1 and 5, where the slower cadence values precision over insane speed, and I prefer that to hyper-fast games that require superhuman reflexes. Honestly, after 7 hours in the beta, I didn't get bored because the stability kept me engaged, adjusting only the HUD to avoid clutter. And this reinforces my opinion that the game is a triumphant return, prioritizing performance over empty hype. On the base PS5, the performance of Battlefield 6 is solid and leaves me optimistic about the future of FPS on consoles. The fidelity mode runs at up to 1440p at 60 FPS, which provides sharp and detailed visuals, ideal for those who want to appreciate destruction effects and dynamic environments without notable drops. The performance mode drops to 1280p, but compensates with rates from 65 to 90 FPS, which I consider perfect for intense multiplayer sessions where responsiveness is crucial. Personally, I prefer performance mode here, because in games like Battlefield, where you're constantly aiming and moving amid chaos, those extra frames make you feel more in control, as if the game responds instantly to your commands. Tests on maps like Capstone or Abbasid show that the console maintains this stability even in modes with 64 players, without severe crashes, which surprises me given the engine's complexity. In the end, I think the PS5 delivers a premium experience that rivals entry-level PCs, and that makes me recommend the console for those who want to play without worrying about settings, just enjoying the adrenaline. The PS5 Pro elevates the performance of Battlefield 6 to another level, and I confess I get excited just imagining running this on a high refresh rate TV. In fidelity mode, it reaches 2160p at 60 FPS, offering real 4K resolution with magnificent visuals that highlight textures, lighting, and explosion particles. The performance mode in turn goes to 1620p with rates of 80 plus FPS, reaching peaks of 90 to 120 FPS in real tests, which is incredible for a console and makes me feel like we're finally in almost PC experience territory. In my personal opinion, this is what makes the PS5 Pro an irresistible choice for enthusiasts like me, who value not just graphic beauty, but also the smoothness that high frames provide in epic battles. Playtest reports indicate that even in action-packed scenarios like Conquest, the console maintains this performance without excessive heating or noise, which reinforces my belief that Sony nailed it with the upgraded hardware. I think that, for those who can invest, the Pro transforms Battlefield 6 into something cinematic and fluid at the same time, raising the standard for multiplayer games. For the Xbox Series X, the performance of Battlefield 6 is quite similar to the PS5, which pleases me because it shows parity between platforms, avoiding that feeling that one is inferior. The fidelity mode aims at 1440p at 60 FPS, with rich, detailed visuals that capture the game's chaotic essence, while performance goes to 1280p with 80 plus FPS, varying from 70 to 110 FPS in real scenarios. Personally, I see this as a win for Microsoft, as the console handles memory and processing demands well, maintaining stability in modes like Breakthrough or Rush, where there are fewer players but still a lot of destruction. Beta tests show it doesn't suffer as much with drops compared to older versions, and that makes me think the Series X is ideal for those playing in Xbox ecosystems with perfect integration to Game Pass. In my view, although it doesn't reach the peaks of the PS5 Pro, it offers a balanced and reliable experience, perfect for long sessions without technical frustrations. The Xbox Series S, on the other hand, presents a more modest performance in Battlefield 6, but still admirable given its hardware limitations, and I appreciate DICE's effort in optimizing it to not fall behind. It runs at up to 1080p at stable 60 FPS, without alternative mode options like fidelity or performance, which means you have a consistent experience, but with some graphical fidelity adjustments to fit the reduced memory. Personally, I think this is impressive, because the most accessible console of the generation manages to maintain solid frames even in complex maps, with optimizations that avoid crashes and ensure fluid gameplay at super stable 60 FPS. Beta reports indicate that, despite initial memory challenges, the game now runs without issues, which makes me respect the Series S as a budget-friendly option for those who want to get into multiplayer without spending fortunes. In my opinion, it's proof that accessibility doesn't need to sacrifice fun, although I recommend it for casual players who don't mind lower resolutions. Comparing all this, the cross-gen performance of Battlefield 6 on consoles leaves me with a positive feeling of evolution in the industry, where even varied platforms manage to deliver fun without major disparities. Support for mouse and keyboard on consoles adds a layer of customization that I love, allowing players like me, who prefer precision, to feel at home even on the couch. Overall, I think the game shines more on premium hardware like PS5 Pro, but doesn't disappoint on base ones, and this reinforces my belief that Battlefield 6 can revive the series' glory with a focus on accessibility and optimization. Personally, I would be satisfied playing on any of them, but would opt for the Pro for those extra frames that make every shootout epic. Deciding to buy Battlefield 6 at launch or wait is a choice I always ponder, based on initial excitement versus patience for a more polished experience, and in my personal case, I lean towards waiting a bit, especially with multiplayer games like this that often launch with bugs and initial balances. As someone who has already burned my fingers on past launches in the Battlefield series, like 2042 that came full of technical problems and missing promised features, I think waiting a few months allows patches to resolve issues like unstable servers, map glitches, and performance optimizations, making the game more fun in the long term. Battlefield 6 seems mainly indicated for fans of chaotic FPS and large-scale multiplayer. Those who love epic battles with vehicles, environmental destruction, and modes like Conquest or Breakthrough, where team strategy shines more than individual precision. Personally, I recommend it for players who enjoy immersion in modern or futuristic war scenarios with a touch of tactical realism, but not for those seeking deep single-player campaigns, since the focus here is on online cooperative and competitive. In the end, if you're like me and value an active community from day one, the launch might be worth the hype. But waiting for promotions and free updates often delivers a more complete package without the initial stress. In my personal opinion, buying Battlefield 6 on launch day can be tempting if you're a hardcore enthusiast of the franchise, those who can't wait to dive into the new maps and innovative mechanics like the improved specialist system or dynamic weather events. But I generally advise waiting to avoid disappointment from an unbalanced meta that needs urgent adjustments. I remember how in previous games like Battlefield 5, the launch brought a wave of excitement with friends online, but soon came frustration with overpowered weapons and bad matchmaking, which made me pause for weeks until fixes. This title is especially indicated for those who like social games, where forming squads with friends or clans is essential, and for players who appreciate deep loadout customization and season-based progression, creating a sense of constant evolution. I see it as perfect for weekend marathons with the gang, but not so much for loners who prefer emotional stories or casual modes without commitment, since the core is intense competition and the need for communication. Waiting, for me, means getting the game on sale with included DLCs, ensuring more value for money and a refined experience that truly captures the series' potential. Personally, I think waiting post-launch for Battlefield 6 is the smartest move for most people, as it allows observing real reviews and seeing if promises of fluid crossplay and robust anti-cheat are fulfilled, avoiding the risk of hype that doesn't sustain, like happened with some EA titles in the past. As someone who loves analyzing multiplayer game metas, I prefer entering when the community has already filtered the best strategies and devs have fixed exploits, making matches fairer and more engaging. The game is indicated for shooter veterans seeking innovation in mechanics like the mode customization portal or Battle Royale element integration, but also for newbies willing to learn in a chaotic and rewarding environment with accessible tutorials and friendly progression. In my view, it shines for those with time to grind ranks and unlock cosmetics, but can frustrate casual players who just want quick matches without dedication, since the skill ceiling is high. Buying at launch only pays off if you want to be part of the initial conversation on networks, but I particularly opt for patience for immersion without regrets. Buying Battlefield 6 right at launch can be a unique adrenaline, especially if you're like me and get anxious to test novelties in open beta. But in practice, I recommend waiting for the ecosystem to stabilize, with crowded servers and fewer crashes that hinder fun. I've lived the excitement of launches where everything seems perfect in trailers, but day one reveals overloads and content lacks, which makes me value waiting for free expansions that enrich the game without extra cost. This title is particularly indicated for large-scale action fans, those who dream of 128-player battles and giant maps, and for those who appreciate the mix of infantry, aerial, and ground vehicles in a total war sandbox. Personally, I would indicate it for groups of friends who play together regularly, creating memories in cooperative modes, but not for those who prioritize emotional stories or solo gameplay, since multiplayer is the pulsing heart. Waiting, in my experience, transforms a good game into great, with a mature community and seasonal events that keep freshness for years. In my personal perspective, the decision to buy Battlefield 6 at launch depends on your level of tolerance for initial imperfections, but I, who have already been disappointed with unfulfilled promises in other FPs, prefer waiting for long-term reviews to confirm if post-launch support will be consistent as promised. It's gratifying to enter early and see the game evolve with your participation and feedback, but the reality is that monthly patches often fix what the launch breaks, making waiting a wise choice for a smoother experience. The game is indicated for light esports enthusiasts or casual competitions, with leaderboards and community tournaments, and for those who enjoy visual and sound customization that makes each match feel unique. I see it as ideal for players seeking escapism in destructible and dynamic worlds, but it may not please minimalists who prefer more focused shooters like Counter-Strike, since chaos is part of the charm. In the end, waiting allows me to invest in a polished title, avoiding the cycle of hype and disappointment that so many launches bring. I think waiting for Battlefield 6 after launch is the best approach to maximize pleasure, especially considering the series' history with updates that add maps and modes for free. But if you're a collector or streamer like I imagine some viewers are, day one might be worth it for fresh and exclusive content. Personally, I prefer entering when the price drops and the game is optimized, ensuring hours of fun without the annoyance of betas disguised as final product. This game is indicated for a wide range of multiplayer players, from casuals who want epic explosions to tacticians who plan elaborate ambushes, and particularly for those with decent hardware to enjoy the graphics and destruction. Well, that was the video. I hope you liked it. See you next time.
Taking objective Bravo.